I had been 23 for 6 days when they sold me. That is the kind of sentence that sounds dramatic out loud, but in the moment it was less dramatic than embarrassing. The auction hall at Greythorne was cold, the boards under my feet were warped from rain, and the woman ahead of me had been on the block for 9 minutes without a bid. I had been standing in line for 2 hours. My legs were going numb in a polite, attentive way, like they were trying not to make a scene. I was wearing the only thing I owned, a grey wool shawl my grandmother had woven the year she died. It was patched at one shoulder, where a fox had got into the herb cupboard once and dragged it down. I had refused to put on the white shift the auctioneer's wife had offered me. I would not be sold in something a stranger had handed me. If they wanted my name on a contract, they would write it next to a girl in grey wool with a fox-patched shoulder. The auctioneer rang his small bell. The woman ahead of me stepped off the block. 2 oath-takers I did not know walked her down the side aisle and out a side door, and someone in the 3rd row coughed. "Elowen of Brackenhollow," the auctioneer read off his slate. 23, healer's daughter. Volunteered her bond to redeem the debt of one Adric of Brackenhollow, her father. Currently held at the sunken gate for default on a salt tax obligation in the amount of 46 silver. He paused. I noticed his pause. He was sorry for me. In the brief, mechanical way auctioneers are sorry for unsold tribute. I tucked that away to look at later. "Opening bid at 20 silver, he said. No one moved. In a pack auction, the opening bid is meant to be a courtesy. Even unwanted omegas usually fetch the opening from a charity-minded merchant or a minor lord trying to look generous in front of his wife. 20 silver is not a fortune. 20 silver is what you might pay to keep a thin omega in your kitchens for a year and call it kindness. No one moved. I had heard about this. The older women back home had warned me. They had said, if no bid comes in the first 3 calls, no bid will come. The hall reads the silence. The hall decides. Once the hall decides, you walk back through the side aisle and you do not come out the way you came in. The auctioneer cleared his throat. 20 silver. The omega has volunteered, gentlefolk. The debt is genuine. The bond is clean. I looked at the 3rd row, where the merchants always sat. 3 of them had bid on the woman before me. None of them met my eyes. I looked at the 2nd row. The minor lords. The Vane cousins were there. Lord Edric Vane himself sat in the centre, which I had not been expecting. Councillors do not normally attend Greythorne auctions in person. He was watching me with the particular blankness of a man who had been told something interesting was about to happen and was waiting for it. I looked at the 1st row, which is reserved for the Alpha King and his beta when they choose to attend. He had chosen to attend. I had not known he would be there. I had not, in fact, known what the Alpha King of Greythorn looked like, because I had never been more than a day's walk from Brackenhollow in my life, and my father did not own a portrait of anyone. What I knew about Torvald of Greythorne Keep was what every common girl knew, that he had taken the throne at 26 by killing the uncle who had tried to take it from him, that he had ruled for 11 years without challenge, that he had refused every lunar match the council had ever proposed to him, and that he attended Omega auctions occasionally, looked at every face on the block, and bid on no one. He was, in fact, looking at me. He was sitting very still in the carved oak chair at the front of the hall. His hands were on the arms of the chair. He was wearing dark wool, no chain of office, a single iron pin at his collar in the shape of a wolf's head. His hair was the colour of pine bark and cut close to his skull. His eyes were too far away for me to read at first, but I could feel them like the cold off a winter shutter. He did not look like a man about to bid. He looked like a man trying very hard to remain seated. 20 silver, said the auctioneer again, into the silence. Calling 20 silver. Last opportunity, gentlefolk. After this, I am obliged to... The king stood up. He did not stand up the way a man stands up when he is about to bid. He stood up the way a man stands up when he has just lost an argument with himself. He took 3 steps away from his chair before he seemed to realise he had moved, and then he took 3 more, and then he walked the length of the central aisle of the auction hall at Greythorne at a pace that was neither rushed nor slow, but had something dangerous and patient in it, like a tide that has decided. The hall went quiet in a way it had not been quiet before. The earlier quiet had been a refusal. This was a held breath. He stopped at the foot of the block. He did not look at the auctioneer. He did not look at the council bench. He did not look at the merchants. He looked up at me. 3 steps below me, 3 steps above him, the closest any Alpha had been to me since I had stood up off my father's cart that morning. And his eyes finally came close enough that I could see them. They were a dark winter brown that did not match the rest of him. They were also, I realised slowly, the eyes of a man who had not slept properly in a very long time. "Step down," he said. His voice was quieter than I had expected. He had not raised it. The hall heard him anyway, because the hall was not breathing. "My king," said the auctioneer, recovering, "the bid is—" "There is no bid." "My king, the Omega has been listed—" "There is no bid, because the Omega is not for sale." I did not know what to do with my legs. They had stopped being numb. They had started, suddenly and inconveniently, doing a thing I had no word for, a held attention, like they were standing on their own behalf for the first time in my life. I was 23 years old. I had walked here in boots that did not fit me. I had volunteered to take my father's bond because the alternative was watching him die in debt prison. And I had been prepared for many outcomes tonight, but I had not been prepared for the Alpha King of Greythorn to stand at the foot of an auction block and tell a room of 50 witnesses that I was not for sale. "My king," said Lord Edric Vane from the second row, in the voice of a man who has been waiting his whole life to say a single sentence aloud and has just been handed his cue. "By what right?" The king did not turn around. He kept his eyes on me. "Bring her down," he said to the auctioneer. "My king, with respect, the Omega's contract requires—" "Bring her down, Master Auctioneer, or step aside and let me." The auctioneer stepped aside. The king held out his hand. I looked at his hand, for what I am told later was a full count of 3. I do not remember it being 3. I remember it being 1 breath, then a longer breath, and then the very specific moment in which I decided I would rather be a woman who took an offered hand from a king than a woman who was carried down off a block by one. I gave him my hand. His was warm. That surprised me. The hall had been cold for hours. He helped me down the 3 steps. He did not let go of my hand at the bottom. He did not speak. He reached with his other hand to the brooch at his own collar, the iron wolf pin, and he unfastened the dark cloak hanging from his shoulders. He shook it out once, and then he put it around my shoulders, over the grey wool shawl with the fox-patched corner, and he fastened the iron pin through the wool of both garments at once. "She is claimed," he said. He did not say it loudly. He said it the way one says a thing that does not need to be made louder to be true. The hall did not move. Lord Edric Vane stood up. "My king," he said. His voice was very smooth. "I am compelled, as senior councillor, to note that the Omega has not been formally presented with consent. The auction is not concluded. There is no contract of claiming on record. There will be. With respect, my king. Lord Edric." The king had not yet turned to look at him. "You arranged for me to be here tonight. You will witness the contract you arranged for me to make. Master Auctioneer, clear the hall. Master Soren," a man I had not noticed in the front row, stood up. Tall, scarred along the side of his jaw, with the kind of patient face that suggested he had been the Alpha King's beta for a long time, and had seen the king do worse things than this. "My king." "Find a scribe. Find the lineage clerk. We are signing tonight." "My king." He turned back to me. The hand that was not holding mine had not yet moved away from the iron pin at my shoulder. He was looking at me with an expression I have spent a great deal of time since then trying to describe. It was not triumphant. It was not tender. It was something closer to the look a man has when he has been carrying something for years and has just been told he is allowed to put it down. "Forgive me," he said. That was all he said. He let go of my hand. He stepped back. He walked back up the central aisle of the auction hall the way he had come, and Master Soren followed him. And Lord Edric Vane stood in the second row, with his face doing several different things at once. And I was left standing at the foot of the block in a king's cloak that was twice my size, with my grandmother's grey wool shawl warm against my collarbone, and an iron wolf pin fastened through both layers at once. I had not yet learned the words for what had just happened to me. I do not think he had either. The signing room at Greythorne Keep is small. It is the room where pack law contracts are sealed, and it has been the same room for 3 centuries. Black oak walls, a single iron-bound table, 4 candles, a lectern for the lineage clerk. It is supposed to feel grave. I had been escorted there by Master Soren himself, which I learned later was not standard procedure, and I had been given a cup of warm cider that I did not drink, because my hands had not yet remembered how to hold things. The king came in through a different door. He had changed his coat. He had not put on a crown. There was a thin iron circlet on the table beside the contract, but he had set it down rather than wear it, and I could not tell if this was a courtesy to me or a habit. He looked, in the candlelight, less like a man trying not to stand up, and more like a man who had stood up and was now trying to remember why. "Lord Edric is on his way," he said, without preamble. "To witness. To delay. He will find a clause. He will produce a witness. He will argue that you were not lawfully presented. I do not have time to explain why, so I am asking you to trust me for the next half hour. After that, I will explain everything." He looked at me. "Will you let me?" I had not, before that moment, been asked anything by an alpha in the entirety of my adult life. Not seriously, not with the kind of attention that meant a no would have been received. I set down the cider. "Yes," I said. He did the smallest thing with his mouth. It was not quite a smile. It was the place a smile lives before a man has decided it is allowed. "Thank you," he said. He went to the lectern. The clerk, a thin man in dark robes who had not yet looked up from his ledger, produced the contract template. The king began reading it aloud in a low, precise voice, going through the clauses in order. Name of the Omega. Name of the Alpha. Witnessed by Master Soren of Greythorne and one other. Present timestamp. Void clauses. Lineage clauses. Consent clauses. The 7 traditional vows. He stopped at the consent clauses. He looked at me. "Elowen of Brackenhollow." It was the first time I had heard him say my full name. He said it carefully, as if he had been practicing. "I have placed my cloak on your shoulders in a public hall before 50 witnesses. I have declared you claimed. I cannot, by the customs of my pack, unmake that declaration without breaking faith with everyone who watched it happen. I am, however, able, and I am required, to ask you now, in private, before this contract is sealed, whether you accept the claim. You can refuse. If you refuse, the cloak comes back, the declaration is annulled in the law, and your father's debt is paid from my own coffers, regardless. The auction does not resume. You walk out of this keep tonight, a free woman." I looked at him. The clerk had stopped writing. Master Soren, in the corner, was looking at the ceiling with the deliberate attention of a man who had been a baiter for a long time and knew when not to listen. "You would pay my father's debt," I said slowly. "Even if I said no?" "Yes." "Why?" He took a breath. He looked at the iron circlet on the table. He looked at the cloak on my shoulders. He looked, finally, at me. "Because I have attended 16 auctions in the past 2 years," he said, "and I have not stood up at any of them. And tonight I stood up before the bell rang the 3rd time. And I owe you the truth that I did not do that for a stranger." He stopped. He visibly considered not finishing. He finished. "My wolf has known your face since the autumn fair at Brackenhollow," he said. "I was there with a hunting party. You were arguing with a vendor about the price of dried mint. I have not been able to attend an auction since without looking for you. I did not know your name until tonight. I did not know your father's name until the auctioneer read it. And I came here this evening intending to leave again without bidding, because I had decided I would no longer hope. And then I saw you on the block. The candles did not move. The clerk did not write. Master Soren did not look down from the ceiling. I did the only thing my hands knew how to do. I reached up and touched the iron wolf pin at my shoulder. It was warm from where his hand had been. I had not realized until I touched it that he had pinned it in a way that did not pull the wool of my shawl. He had been careful with my grandmother's weaving. "All right," I said. "All right?" "I accept the claim." He closed his eyes for a moment. I noticed this. I will notice it for the rest of my life. The Alpha King of Greythorne Keep, who had not flinched when the auctioneer called the third bid into silence, closed his eyes for a single breath in a black oak signing room because I had said 2 words. If you have made it this far, stay. The story is about to bend in ways I am still working out for myself. Whatever brought you here, the title, the cloak, the king who would not stay seated, leave a comment somewhere along the way and tell me where you are listening from tonight. I'm told these things matter for whatever it is that keeps her voice finding new firesides. I hope it finds yours. Now, Lord Edric. He arrived 11 minutes later. I know it was 11 minutes because Master Soren had been counting against the contract clock, which is the kind of detail a beater, who has been a beater for a long time, notices. He came in with 2 of his cousins and a man in clerk's robes I did not recognize, carrying a sheaf of older-looking documents in a leather portfolio. "My king," he said, "I am compelled to raise a procedural objection before the seal is set." "Raise it!" The Omega Elwyn of Brackenhollow was not formally presented for consent prior to the bid call. The Statute of Volunteered Bonds, Year of Greythorne 487, 3rd revision, requires that an Omega who has volunteered her bond, as opposed to one offered by her household, be given the opportunity to refuse a bidder before the bid is placed. Your claim was placed before that consent was offered. The auction is therefore procedurally void. The Omega returns to the block. The session resumes tomorrow at dawn. He said this with the polished competence of a man who has been waiting to say something for several hours and has rehearsed it twice. The king looked at him. He looked at him for what I am told later was a very long time. "Master auctioneer," he said, without turning his head, "is in the antechamber. Master Soren, bring him." Master Soren left. He returned with the auctioneer, a small grey-haired man whose name I learned later was Master Halric, and who had spent the past 20 minutes drinking what appeared to be a large cup of brandy. "Master Halric," said the king, "before I stepped down from my chair this evening, did I send any instruction through Master Soren to your dais?" "You did, my king." "What was the instruction?" Master Halric looked at his shoes. "That the Omega Elwyn of Brackenhollow was to be asked, before she stepped onto the block, whether she would refuse the King of Greythorne as a bidder." "And was she asked?" "She was, my king. By me, in the antechamber, before her name was called." I turned to look at the auctioneer. I remembered, very suddenly, the strange small question Master Halric had put to me in the antechamber, just before I had walked out. Would I object to being bid upon by the highest-seated man in the hall, and how I had not understood it, and had said no, because I had not understood it. I had been formally presented. I had not known it had happened. The king was watching me. He had not moved his eyes from Lord Edric Vane. "Lord Edric," he said, very quietly, "you have just argued procedural void in front of 3 witnesses and a lineage clerk. You will now sit down. You will witness the seal. You will not raise this objection again, in this keep or any other, on pain of your seat." Lord Edric sat down. He sat down in the way a man sits down when he has discovered that the trap he set was the trap he was standing in. The contract was sealed 11 minutes later. I learned a great many things in the days that followed. I learned that the recognition ball was a tradition older than the Greythorne line, that any claim made publicly at an auction required a formal recognition by the council within a fortnight, and that the ball was where this happened. I learned that Torvald had attended 16 auctions in 2 years, and that this had become in certain council circles a quiet joke. I learned that Lord Edric Vane had a daughter named Hild, who had been seated in the second row that night, and had not been told she was being seated in the second row in order to be visible to the king. I learned that the king's library at Greythorne was on the eastern wing of the keep, and that he went there every morning before the household woke, and that the chair beside his at the long reading table had been pulled out and dusted by a maid named Tilda the day after the auction without anyone having asked her to. I learned that Torvald himself did not know what to do with me at first. He was, Marin called it this later when I asked her, a king who had been told no for so long he had forgotten how to ask for yes. He brought me to the library on the second morning and gestured at the chair and said, "If you would like," and then could not finish the sentence. I sat in the chair. He sat in his. He did not speak for 40 minutes. When he finally did speak, it was about a manuscript on his desk, a treatise on pack law lineage, and I told him I could not read it because no one had taught me. And he stopped, very still, and then he asked if he might teach me, in the same tone he had used in the signing room when he asked me to trust him for half an hour. I said yes to that too. Marin found me on the third morning. She was the woman who ran the holding pen at the auction hall, the one who had given me water in the antechamber, and who had said nothing when I refused the white shift. She was a former Omega who had aged out of the auctions, and the king had brought her into the keep 3 years ago to oversee the women's quarters. She was 60-something, with iron in her hair, and a watchful kindness in her face I have come to trust above almost anyone else's. She found me in the kitchens, where I had gone because the library had begun to feel like a room I was being trusted in, and I did not yet know what to do with the trust. "He has stopped sleeping," she said, without preamble. "Marin, since the auction, the household notices. He sat in the library all of last night. He has done this before, around things that matter. I am not telling you to fix it. I am telling you because someone should." She put a hand on my shoulder, the one with the fox patch, and squeezed. "The ball is in 9 days," she said. "Eat. Sleep. He is going to need you steady." The recognition ball at Greythorne Keep is held in the Long Hall, which is the same hall where the auction had been, but transformed, the dais cleared, the boards swept, the iron chandeliers polished, 6 long tables laid end to end down the centre. The senior council attends. The lords of the 12 outlying packs attend. The Alpha King and his claimed mate sit at the head table. The mate is publicly recognised. The cloak is publicly affirmed. The 7 vows are read aloud one final time, and the claim becomes pack law in front of every wolf who matters. I wore a deep green dress the seamstresses had made for me. I wore my grandmother's shawl over my shoulder again, because I had refused to be parted from it. I wore the iron wolf pin at the front, where Marin had taught me to fasten it. Lord Edric Vane was seated at the 3rd table. He had not, in the 9 intervening days, given me a single look that lasted longer than half a second. The wine arrived at the high table just after the 2nd course. It was poured by a serving boy I did not recognise. He poured the king's cup first, then mine, then Master Soren's, then the senior councillor's at the end. He did not pour the cups at any other table. Marin, who was standing along the wall behind me as part of the household guard, saw this happen and went very still. I did not see her go still. I was lifting my cup. I lifted my cup. I sipped. The first thing I felt was the cold. Not the cold of cool wine, a different cold. A wrongness under the tongue. A taste like crushed iron and something herbal that had no business being in any wine I had ever drunk. Marin moved. She was at my shoulder before the cup had left my hand. She struck it from my fingers. The cup hit the floor of the high table, and the wine spread in a dark arc across the polished oak. And somewhere in the hall, a man stood up too quickly and overturned his chair, and Marin's voice rang out, louder than I had ever heard it, across the entire ballroom. Wolfsbane, the king's wine, the king's mate's wine. The hall stopped. Master Soren was already moving. So were 2 of the household guard. So was the king. He came around the table to me without saying a word. He took my chin in his hand, gently, gently, the way one might tilt a wounded bird to see its breathing. And he looked into my eyes and said, "How much?" "A sip." "How much?" "Half a swallow. Marin." "Marin saw," he said. He was already speaking past me, to her. "Wolfsbane, in what dilution? The stronger preparation or the weaker?" "The stronger. Healer's grade. The serving boy is the wine steward's nephew. He came in through the side door 3 minutes ago." The king turned. He looked across the long hall, past the senior council, past the lords of the 12 outlying packs, directly to the 3rd table. Lord Edric Vane had not yet moved. He had not, I realised later, expected to be looked at. He had expected, in the chaos, to be invisible, to slip out of the side door while the keep's healers attended their king. The king did not speak. He simply did not look away. Lord Edric stood up. He walked the length of the hall to the foot of the high table because the king's gaze did not permit anything else. Master Soren had 2 of the guard close in behind him before he reached the dais. I was beginning to feel the wolfsbane. It is not, despite the name, a feeling like being bitten. It is a feeling like the body is being asked, very politely and with great pressure, to stop knowing how to breathe. I felt the weight of it settle behind my ribs. I felt a coldness moving outward from my throat. I felt, distantly, the iron wolf pin at my shoulder, the only fixed point in a room that was beginning to lengthen at the edges. The king's hand was on the back of my chair. I felt him decide, in the space of a single breath, between the wolfsbane in me and the man in front of him. He chose me. "Marin," he said, "take her to the western chamber. Send for Healer Tova. I will follow within the hour." He turned to Lord Edric. "You will be detained in the guard quarters," he said. "You will not be permitted ink, paper, or company. The pack will hear your charges at the next moon." He turned back to me. He took my hand. He pressed his forehead against the back of my fingers for the length of one breath. He did not speak. He did not need to. Marin walked me out of the long hall. The pack stood as I passed. I did not look at any of them. I was looking at my own hand, and the place where his forehead had been, and the cold moving outward from my throat, and the iron pin at my shoulder which was, I noticed dimly, even through the wolfsbane, still warm. I survived the wolfsbane. Healer Tova was a small, fierce woman who arrived with 3 apprentices and a packed satchel, and who did not lift her head from her work for 4 hours. The treatment was not pleasant. I will not pretend it was. The body's resistance to a poison that wants to stop it is not gentle, and there were 2 hours in the middle of the night when I was not sure my lungs remembered how to do what they had been doing for 23 years without prompting. I remember Marin's hand on mine. I remember the king in the doorway where Healer Tova had ordered him to stand, because she would not have him at the bedside crowding her work. I remember the iron pin on the table beside the bed where Marin had set it, gleaming in candlelight. By dawn, the cold was gone. By midday, I was sitting up. By the evening of the day after, I was walking, slowly, on Marin's arm, and the king was beside me, having not slept again, and he had stopped pretending he was not afraid. He took me to the library. He sat me in the chair. He did not sit in his. He knelt down, and yes, the Alpha King of Greythorn Keep knelt, in his own library, on the cold flagstone, in front of an Omega from Brackenhollow, who had been auctioned 12 days ago, and he took my hand, and he said, "I should have moved faster. I knew Edric was angry. I knew the ball was a risk. I did not move fast enough. I will not make that mistake again. There will be a public recognition tomorrow, the full pack. I should have done it on the first day. I was afraid I was rushing you. I have been so careful not to rush you that I have nearly let you be killed. Tell me what you need." I looked at him. I had been 23 for 19 days now. I had given my hand to a king in an auction hall, accepted a claim in a signing room, drunk wolfsbane at a recognition ball, and lived. I had been called Lady of Greythorne by people I did not yet know how to look at. I had been carried twice by men I did not yet know the names of. I had not yet been kissed. I had not, in fact, been touched at all, beyond the king's hand on mine, and his forehead against my fingers, and the warmth of an iron pin he had fastened with great care through my grandmother's weaving. I leaned forward in the chair. I put my hand against his cheek. The first time I had touched his face. The first time I had touched him at all in a way that was mine and not a response. And I felt him go very still. "What I need," I said, "is for you to stop apologizing and tell me my name." "Elowyn." "Again?" "Elowyn of Greythorne." "There." He turned his face into my palm. He did not move otherwise. He stayed kneeling on the flagstone of his own library, and he leaned his face into my hand for a long moment, and when he straightened up, he did so the way a man does when he has at last been allowed to set down something he has been carrying for a very long time. He stood. He drew me up. He kissed me once, briefly, and the kiss is not what I will tell you about. The kiss was an emotional kind of thing, the kind that has more to do with a door opening than with the lips that close it. But what I will tell you is that when he drew back, he was, finally, smiling. Properly. The kind of smile no one on his council had ever seen. "Tomorrow," he said. "The pack. All of them. Tomorrow." 6 months later, I am writing this in the library at Greythorne Keep. The eastern windows pour morning light across the long table where Torvald used to sit alone before the household woke. He sits there still. He is sitting there now, in fact, reading a treatise on healing herbs that I have asked him to summarize for me. But the chair beside his is no longer empty. My grandmother's grey wool shawl is folded across the back of it. He moves it for me when he comes in. He folds it again when I go. Lord Edric Vane has been stripped of his seat and his lands, and is currently living in a small house on the western coast under a writ of permanent exile. His daughter Hild was returned to her mother's family, and has, by Marin's report, begun training as a midwife in a coastal village where no one calls her lady. Marin says she seems happier. I am inclined to believe her. Master Halric, the auctioneer, received a small pension from the keep. Torvald insisted, for asking me the question in the antechamber that I had not understood was a question. Marin runs the women's quarters still, though she now has 3 apprentices and an office with a window. She comes for tea on Thursdays. She brings honey cakes. She tells me Torvald has begun sleeping again. My father has been moved from the sunken gate to a house in Greythorne town that has a workshop attached, where he has resumed his trade. His debt was paid the morning after the auction, from the king's own coffers, with no ceremony. He sent a single letter. It said only, "Thank you. He is good. Tell him I am sorry I asked you to do what you did." I have not yet shown the letter to Torvald. I will, when I am ready. The iron wolf-pin lives at my shoulder still. It has been mended once, the catch wore thin, and Torvald carried it to the smith himself and waited while the work was done. He has never once let it leave the household for longer than that. Yesterday, in the long hall, a young woman came to court, a healer's apprentice from a village I had not heard of, to petition the king about a salt tax dispute. She walked the length of the hall in boots that did not fit her. She did not bow when she reached the dais, because no one had told her to. She made her case in a voice that did not shake. Torvald listened. He gave her the ruling she had hoped for. He had the salt tax officer brought in and reprimanded in front of the council, and then he sent the young woman home with a writ and a small purse and a quiet recommendation that she consider applying for the new Healers' Guild in Greythorne town. When she had gone, he turned to me. "She did not bow," he said. "She did not." They never do. The ones worth claiming. I do not think he knew he had said it aloud. I knew. So, tell me, if you had been in that hall that first night, and the king had stood up before the third bell, would you have given him your hand? Or would you have made him take the steps for you? Leave a comment and let me know. And if her voice was the kind of voice you would spend another evening with, the moon and iron icon at the bottom of your screen is where she keeps the other nights. There are more fires. There are always more. I am Elowen of Greythorne now. I will see you at the next one.